Evening, folks, and thank you so much for joining me. I see we have Annette here, Phyllis, Shah, Hassani. There are a couple other names that I'm seeing coming in. So thank you so much for joining me, because I know earlier's night everybody have plenty things to do. So I am not going to be making this a long live. This is a short live to just kind of talk about what has happened in the last couple of days, but maybe also too in the last couple of weeks, right? So hi, Madam Moringa, hi Deborah, hi Belladonna, hi Carla, hi Laurent, how you doing? Hi Liza Beckles, Phyllis Antoine, who else am I missing out on there? There are a couple, Cyril, Terrence, Patricia, Michael, Marvin, Paula Barrymon. So good evening to everybody that has joined me. So it's not a long live, but I guarantee you that it will be worth your while. So a couple weeks ago, I was going to do a live, right? Hi, Constance. Hi, Marissa. Yes, let me say Happy New Year to everybody, because by the time this is done, everybody will want to go off and do their thing, and I want to make sure I remember to say Happy New Year now. So Happy New Year, and I am wishing only good things for you all. The same things that I want for myself. I want the upcoming year to be a year where I have a lot of peace, I have a lot of creativity in my life, I have a lot of joy. Those are the things that I'm looking forward to in 2025. Hi, Five Rivers. Nice to see you all here. Hi, Billy Bob. Hi, Lisa Moore. Hi, Rainman. Where the pastel? Rainman, you show up in my live and you ain't walk with no food or drinks? I have ginger beer. I have spiked ginger beer. This is special ginger beer that Anthony Morgan Beach would have made for me. So there's some, it was soaked in rum. I think the ginger was soaked in rum for about a year. And so now I have ginger beer that was soaked in rum. So it is lovely. It's delicious. Hi, Francilla. Hi, Vanji. Good. So let's get into it, because I don't want to keep people back. Plus, I have fireworks that I will have to deal up with very shortly, because the fireworks starts going off very early in this part of Diego Martin. So since 5 o'clock, people have been letting off fireworks randomly. So this live is going to be disturbed by loud noises. So let's go. So the 267 persons who are here, thank you so much for being here with me and spending time with me. This is a live that I planned to do 3 weeks ago. I wanted to come and talk about all of the set a little coalition alliance / parties that the UNC was joining itself up with, right? And so I called Tech Guy and I said to him, hey, sort me out with some with a poster now. I want to talk about Kamala and I want to talk about all the small parties, right? So Garvin Nicholas, Phillip Edward Alexander, Gary Griffith, Roger, all of them. I wanted to talk about them and their relevance to politics and what it really means for them to be coming in 2024 to announce that they are part of a coalition for 2025, because they're really out of ideas at this stage. And then that evening, or that afternoon, I took the dogs for a really long walk. And at the end of the walk, I was very tired. Extremely tired. So I said to myself, you know what? I don't have to do this live this evening, that particular Sunday evening. I can do it the Monday evening. So I'll just hold on to the poster and do it the Monday evening. And then guess what happened that Monday morning? That Monday morning, I got up, and this was one of the first things that I experienced that morning. So I woke up. woke up the next morning to the news that somebody who has been a friend of mine, even before, long before politics, because I've known Lisa Morris-Julian since around 2010, thereabouts, right? So this is when Lisa was a teacher in Barrett area, doing theater, writing plays, and we met each other at a writing residence. I didn't think I would still be crying now. So sorry. So I couldn't do the live. I couldn't do anything for days. As a matter of fact, that Monday morning, as soon as I got the news and was clear on what had transpired, and I want to big up members of the fire services here who made it their business to make sure that I was aware of what was going on and what some of the details were behind the scenes, because I feel that's the only thing that kind of kept me sane that day. So I've known Lisa for years, long time, long before politics. When Lisa was getting into politics, there are a group of us that she was in a chat group with, right? Like about 5 of us. I could call her names. Beach, the same fellow who make the ginger beer for me. Alana, Lisa, Janine, who was since passed from cancer, and at that point in time, Christian Hume, and then Christian Hume eventually kind of left the chat group. We used to be talking all the time, current affairs, wherever, right? Because we'd met each other, we knew each other, we'd liked each other from interacting online. So even though I'd met Lisa in person, I hadn't met Anthony or Lana, but we all kind of gravitated towards each other. And we formed a friendship, right? A virtual friendship, for the most part, until eventually it became an in-person friendship. When Lisa had made the decision that she was going to become a counselor, she came to us in the group and said, I'm thinking about doing this. What you all think? And we all gave feedback, we all gave advice, we all said whatever she decided to do, we would be supporting her. Full 100, right? Whatever she decided to do, stay in, stay out, we supporting her. Lisa and I had sort of relationship where I used to constantly make jokes with her and tell her, you and your husband just make real nice children, make a child for me now. All you had to mind the child, I go mind the child. So to wake up to that news the Monday morning knocked me down. And it knocked me down, I would say, for a good 2 weeks. I think it's really only, last week? Because I tell you only a flat. Christmas went out the window for me with the passing. And I wanted, whatever was the next live I did, to at least dedicate some time to talk about her passing and her life. So, those of you who only know Lisa as a politician, I need you all to understand that Lisa had an amazing sense of humor. Real dry sense of humor. Lisa was also the sort of person where even if you wasn't she friend, or you didn't think you was she friend, Lisa would decide you is she friend, pull you into her circle, and that's that. And she was very, I would say, loyal to fault sometimes. And even though when she got into the parliament and became a government minister, and we'd had a private conversation where I said to her, listen, because you are now in the position that you are in, and because I do a lot of commentary and a lot of critique and criticism, regardless of who is the office holder, there's now going to have to be a certain level of boundaries between us. But we would still reach out to each other, talk, chat. If she wanted a little bit of advice, I would give it. If I needed advice, she would give it. The thing that remained consistent with Lisa is that she didn't change in terms of who she was when I knew her. However, more than a decade ago to now. She remained very normal, very down to earth. But the thing that struck me with Lisa is that Lisa made an attempt to learn. She made an attempt to learn from her mistakes. She was always, I think, aware that she had challenges, whether it was dyslexia, whatever her challenges were. And she had this way that she would focus on working to improve herself. So if somebody criticized her and said, you're doing bad at this, that, the other, she would take it on and she would want to improve herself. So I just wanted to honor Lisa Morris-Julian, the person that I knew. Not the MP, not the former mayor, not the former councillor, not the junior minister of education, just the Lisa that I knew. And what happened was devastating. But I don't want to comment on the event itself. I want to wait for the investigations and the fire reports that have to come out, because there were reports that were being done by the fire service, and then of course there would have been the commission that was set up, the investigative committee that was set up, so they would have their reports coming through, and I'll wait on that. And her funeral is on Thursday, so I hope that she and her children have transitioned safely, and all my love and condolences to the family, especially Anne. Anne is her mom. Anne is somebody that I struck up a social media relationship with as well, and quite enjoy Anne's commentary on social media. We've met on occasion, but not very regularly. We usually interact with each other via social media. So, that's that. Oh my goodness, I was supposed to put up that. So there was another bit of loss. Phillip. Today, Wells Services Petroleum Company Limited indicated that they have suspended their search for Phillip. As you know, there was the accident last week, and in that accident with the rig 1110, one person was injured. About 70, a little over 70 workers were rescued and evacuated, and Phillip went missing, and the search for him has been suspended. So I want to again give condolences to his family and friends and all his loved ones, and to hope that he transitions safely. Okay, so that is that. So I want to offer congratulations. And I want to offer congratulations to this dude. So for the last week or two, I have been putting up posts dedicated to this guy, Andre Abraham. Andre Abraham is the owner of Fire One Fireworks. And Andre Abraham, every year around this time, like 10 days or so, for about 10 days, from like about the 22nd of December, sets up a series of tents at private mall locations all over the country. So Westby's car park in Diego Martin, Starlight Shopping Plaza car park in Diego Martin, West Mall car park in Diego Martin. I see Extra Plaza car park. I see what is Price Smart. Is Price Smart down Macoya, down not Macoya, because their factory is Macoya. Anyhow, there are a number of private mall locations where he knows the foot traffic will be high, and he sets up tents there, these temporary tents, for about 10 days or so out of the year, and terrorizes the entire country with the fireworks on those tents. Now, a number of persons who, right, Price Smart Chabonas, a number of persons felt that I shouldn't be ponging Andre Abraham. So let me tell all you why the ass are ponging Andre Abraham. Andre knows very well that the fireworks laws in the country are old, are lax, and have loopholes. So Andre knows very well that it is legal for him to import it, right? There's nothing says he can't import it once he gets the license. He knows it is legal for him to sell it as a wholesaler. He knows that it is legal for him to sell it as a retailer. because the only prohibitions the law really has is where you can set off the fireworks. So he's not doing anything illegal, but he is facilitating behavior that is illegal. He is also facilitating behavior that is unethical and behavior that is harmful. Because it's not just about my dogs. There are lots of other people with dogs. It is also not just about dogs. Because of course, the most popular pet in the country would be dogs. But there are lots of other kinds of animals that people have in their homes or in their yards, on their properties. There are also lots of wild or non-domesticated animals that are out and about that get frightened by the sound of the fireworks. But because he's not doing anything illegal, he's not going to stop selling it. And when you ask him about selling silent fireworks, his argument is people want noise. People don't want silent fireworks. So Andre has decided that he don't care. He don't give a fuck. If elderly people have issues, that is all your business. Take jam. People with animals have issues, take jam. Wildlife around the country have issues, take jam. Once he could make his little dust for 10 days out of the year. So Andre, congratulations. You've had another year to terrorize the nation. Here's my round of applause to you. Jackass. Okay. Now this is all I really come for. Let me get into it. Now, pretty much everything all I need to know in the poster. Right? Everything all I need to know in the poster. Because the thing I like about tech guy is when I call him and I break down for him what it is I want to try to do with my lives, and he send back the artwork. The artwork this encompass everything that I want him that I want the artwork to encompass. So I want you to look at the image thoroughly and everything all you need to know in the image. Let's get into it. So yesterday morning kind of remind me of the morning that I get the news about Lisa. I was sleeping in my bed. My phone goes off, and my phone goes off at about 7:15, somewhere thereabouts. So when I go off 7:15, I stoops, right? Because I wasn't really in the mood. So when I swipe to open it up to check to see, I see a message, and the message is this true? Now, as a woman, just hate when people inbox me messages to ask me if something is true or accurate or not. And I'll explain why. Because it means that whoever is asking the question is giving me work. So if it's a situation where at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm not in the mood to activate my brain to figure out anything, or worse yet, having to reach out to other people to verify a piece of information, I just get annoyed. So I see the message, I was like, and then I was like, okay, all right, this fella, he's a solid one, he's my boy. So let me open it up properly. So I open it up and I see the document. It was one document by that point in time. And I said to myself, what? This can't be true? I'm coming back to that timeline in a little bit because I want to be able to walk you through a couple things. We walking through 7:15 to 9:45 on the morning, or yesterday morning, right? The morning of the announcement of the state of emergency. Because I want you all to understand the importance of documents, the importance of security, the importance of integrity, the importance of responsibility, the importance of having a leadership role, the importance of ambition, and when ambition gets the better of you, and the ways in which sometimes we could make very, very foolish decisions. So yesterday morning, many of us would have gotten up and heard by 8 o'clock in the morning that the country was under a state of emergency. Then by 10 o'clock, there would have been a press conference. And then sometime around 9 o'clock last night, we would have gotten the guidelines. So we know that as a result of this state of emergency, no curfew, but there will be extended or enhanced powers of detention and arrest and investigation on the part of the TTPS and Army. So they get special powers, and the purpose of the special powers that they get in, basically the suspension of our constitutional rights. All right. So it was couched to say that Israeli gang members are being targeted. But once you're under a state of emergency, it means that every single citizen, their rights are suspended. So right now, police could run in here and say they suspect me of something, wherever it is, and they need to detain and question me, and there would be nothing illegal about that. Once the police could prove to their higher-ups that they have some bit of information or some bit of intelligence that suggests to them that I might be some sort of threat, they could run in here and detain me. That is what happens when there is a state of emergency. And that is why I am never keen on states of emergencies, because it always means that there is a suspension of everybody's constitutional rights. And of course, with that can come a curfew, which can curb people's ability to move in particular ways, right? So those are the rights that you have to be concerned about. Marsha said they have to identify themselves first. Marsha, just now, I want to add this to the screen. So Marsha says they have to identify themselves first. Marsha means saying, no, but in Trinidad, police just be finding their uniform and army men uniform all over the place, right? And police badge, right? So we have found civilians in civilian homes, in the yard, in the bush, in people's vehicle, army clothes and police clothes. Criminals have disguised themselves as members of the armed services to commit crimes in this country. So all of that had me concerned, because I'm there like, okay, suppose people who want to put on a walk, knowing that there have been the suspension of rights and that army and police could go into people's homes and do whatever, still have access to uniforms and decide that they are going to put on these items that kind of look like police or army, and they storm people's homes. That was just a side thing that I thought of, right? Yes, they have to identify themselves, but we also have to bear in mind that we have a TTPS and an army that have shown signs of being compromised and corrupt. Let we not put water in my mouth to say them things. So there was the announcement of the state of emergency. There were the details given. There was the press conference, the Q&A. And yes, I saw Akash's behavior. So I'm not going to pretend that I didn't see Akash's behavior. So let's address Akash for a second. Did I? Wait. I forgot to put that just now. Let me deal up with this, because I thought I had placed it here, but like I didn't. All right. So, oops. So folks, let me get something very straight. This is Akash Samaru with his wife, Ashley Badal, at his wedding. Akash is friendly with the United National Congress. He's close to several of the MPs in the United National Congress. It has nothing illegal about that. It even have anything unethical about that. He can be He's entitled to political affiliation. When it becomes unethical is when it impacts the work that he is doing. So if his political alignment is apparent in the job that he is doing, that is when it becomes a problem. And so for me, if you're showing up to do your job, and every single time you show up to do your job, there is a particular angle or a particular agenda, then those things need to be declared so that the viewing public knows whether or not they're going to take you seriously or take you with a pot spoon of salt. The next thing I want to say is this. We all know Akash's modus operandi when he comes into a press conference. We still letting people, or journalists like Akash and Anna and Urvashi and Sean Douglas and Kijan and whoever else, we still letting journalists come into a press conference and run the show. If I hold in a press conference, as in me personally, right? If I am holding a press conference and I'm hosting it, the way I see it, I'm the person that has the information. I'm the person that has, in terms of the power balance in a room, I'm the person that has the power. They have come to ask me questions, but what is most important to me is not the journalists in the room, but the listening public. So if I am in a room and Akash decides to be disrespectful, I don't have to take Akash and his disrespect on, because the public will see that Akash is disrespectful. What I have to do is ensure that the public receives the information that I need them to receive. I don't need to get into no back and forth, especially now with no little boy, because Akash comes into a press conference with the purpose of disrespecting people, rattling them, and attempting to dick measure. He can't dick measure with me. How? We cannot dick measure. That is impossible. So when I see government ministers who are supposed to be seasoned people decide that they are going to allow these little journalists who just come unprepared to press conferences all the time, and they come just to ask certain aggressive questions, I not letting you run no rings around me. You mad? There is no way you could run rings around me. You ask a question, if I have the answer, you're getting the answer. If I don't have the answer, you're not going to get the answer. Punto final. Because my focus is not the reporter. My focus is the members of the public who need the information. So if I hold in a press conference, and the purpose of the press conference is to inform the public of the state of emergency and reassure the public of how the state of emergency is going to be handled, you ain't getting me to get down in no mud and get into no back and forth with Akash. Then that's not my responsibility in a press conference, especially not with a little boy who just come to press conferences unprepared. And there are a range of press conferences where he shows up unprepared. What he thinks is journalism is so minister, so don't you think? There are so many ways to diffuse the foolishness that Akash is carrying on with. So many ways. But you see, when he come in with his ego and other people come in and lead in with their egos as well, what you will get is that kind of exchange. That kind of exchange is necessary. Punto final. So for those of you who are upset about Akash, don't be upset about Akash. Akash doing what he gets sent there to do. And whoever it is hosting the press conferences and answering the questions need to remember that they are there to do a particular job as well. So yes, he is disrespectful. All his body language disrespectful. Do you think he doesn't know that? He knows he is being disrespectful. Because in his mind, that's his role there. His editors see that as his role there. You all need to bear that in mind. His editors are encouraging that as well. Because his editors haven't pulled him up. They've not said to him, do differently, be more professional. So they want him to show up at press conferences and be rude and disrespectful. And I would let him do it. I would let him show the public just how disgusting and uncouth and abrasive he is, because that does not appeal to everybody. There are whole groups of persons who see that and it does not work for them at all. So I would leave him to carry on with that. The only people looking on at press conferences that feel impressed by what Akash is doing are people that already have a dislike, a deep dislike for the government. So Akash is playing to a very specific audience. The ministers who are answering have to remember that they have a wider audience that they need to be answering to. That's all. He doing his thing, they have to do theirs. So that's all I had to say about he. I wasn't even perturbed because I knew that is how the press conference was going to go. I knew that he would jump out and he would immediately ask very specific questions. And there were questions he asked. My issue would not have been with the content of the question. It would have been how the question was posed. Because every reporter in that room had a right to ask, where is the Prime Minister? And let me tell you why. The Prime Minister is the head of the cabinet. The Prime Minister is the leader of the government. And it is the government of Trinidad and Tobago that would have made the decision to call a state of emergency. So the person who is the leader of the government, the person who has the support and consensus of the government, the Prime Minister has to be the person, ought to be the person in all of my years here seeing states of emergencies. Yesterday was the first state of emergency I saw called, and the head of the government was not the person speaking to the public. So even I was concerned. And I felt that was a valid question to ask. Where is the Prime Minister at this point in time? I was also not impressed with the way in which it was answered. I felt that the two ministers that handled the press conference could have easily said the Prime Minister in Tobago. That's all. The Prime Minister is at this time in Tobago. And if further questions came, they could have indicated that he was handling serious personal matters in Tobago and leave it at that. And then proceed. But the minute you decide that you're going to get combative over a reasonable question, because the country looking on would have been asking the same thing, and which is why I keep saying, when you get into a room and media is asking you questions, you are not to focus on media. You have to be thinking about the audience, your public. Trinibri, I disagree with you, right? I disagree with you. Once the Prime Minister is not a hostage anywhere, people would expect the Prime Minister to be present. And yes, Alana, I know that the Prime Minister was not present in 1990, but in 1990 there was no press conference to indicate that there is going to be a state of emergency. All right? So the public would have been expecting a Prime Minister to be there, to be present, to be answering questions. And so the people who handle the press conference needed to anticipate that and just deal with it calmly. Not get into an antagonistic thing, because then it changed the tone and tenor of the entire press conference. And yes, Akash was being an idiot, but that's what he came there to be. And they played into his hands. The minute you decide that that's how you're going to answer questions, you're playing to his hands. So, I lost my train of thought. So the press conference was held. The Prime Minister was not there. Minister Young, who is the acting Attorney General, would have explained the conditions of the state of emergency and given the reasons for the state of emergency. I am still of two minds about the need for the state of emergency, and I'm going to explain why. So I understand, why can't the ministers do it? Shema, the ministers, you understand what a state of emergency is? You understand that a state of emergency doesn't get called by or doesn't get decided on by just any minister, that it is the leader of the government who has to make that decision and reach out to the president. Let me pause for a second here and say this. Please don't allow your political passions to get in the way of something like the Constitution. Right? Plain and simple. Because if Kamla Persad-Bissessar, so let me flip it for you. If Kamla Persad-Bissessar had called for a state of emergency and she didn't even bother to turn up at the press conference, because back in 2011, when Kamla called the state of emergency from her bedroom, I bashed her left, right, and center. Why didn't this happen from the diplomatic residence? Why weren't you in an official government space? Why were you in your bedroom? Why you had Prakash and Anand and whoever else sitting around you while you're making this statement? Why couldn't you sit in the official office of the Prime Minister and address the nation? Right? So I would have buffed Kamla Persad-Bissessar in 2011. You're coming to tell me in 2024 we're issuing a call for a state of emergency, and I shouldn't even ask why the Prime Minister isn't there? I'm not saying that it was an imperative. I am saying that the question was a valid question. I'm saying that reporters would have been asking that question because they knew that the public looking on would be asking the same thing. So that was a question to anticipate from the jump. You're calling a press conference at 10 o'clock to make a big announcement like this, and the Prime Minister who is in the country, remember that? The Prime Minister who is in the country, is not that the Prime Minister overseas. It is not like the state of emergency had to be called while the Prime Minister was out of the country and a Deputy Prime Minister was functioning. The Prime Minister was within the jurisdiction. This is a serious, significant announcement being made. The Prime Minister is not present. It's not a weird question for people to ask, right? Good. So the question was asked, and I felt it was a valid question, and I felt allowing those questions to become back and forth things, not necessary at all. Just answer the thing, full on, and move on. Whatever the answers had to be, answer it and move on. So the reason given for the state of emergency has a lot to do with the spike in murders, especially in the month of December, and intelligence that would have come in indicating that there are going to be significant reprisal killings. So let me say this. I believe that reprisal killings are a serious thing. I believe that, hang on a second, what's that? I don't think Rhoda likes Minister Young. She's affiliated to the Minister of Finance who feels shot. Oh my word. Well, last scene, you need to stick around. Stick around, my darling, because I would imagine that you've been asked to look at the live and to jump in with your thoughts, right? So stick around. Good. So I believe the information about reprisal killings, but I also believe that we have laws in place already that would allow the police and army to function as joint patrols and tackle the issues with gangs and reprisal killings. However, while I am not comfortable with the call for the state of emergency, and that's because realistically and from a research point of view, states of emergencies have never been shown to address crime issues. What tends to address crime issues in any country, especially countries like ours, is good intelligence, reliable intelligence, and a police force that is not corrupt. So a police force that acts on the intelligence that it gets. We have for years been hearing about struggles with intelligence. Earlier this year, there was a huge issue with the SSA and what was taking place at the SSA. So we know that our intelligence services was undermined and weakened in a particular way. We also know that there's been a pattern established that the TTPS is quite compromised and corrupt. Just recently, there would have been some big stories about cases being thrown that involved police officers. And there are a number of situations where police officers are under investigation and the investigations go nowhere because it's the police that are investigating the police. So you have a situation where we have legislation that would actually allow police officers to deal up with gangs, to deal up with reprisal killings, to allow for police and army to do joint patrols. We also have a fair amount of information that shows, not in Jamaica, not in Haiti, and I rather suspect not in Trinidad and Tobago, do states of emergencies actually tackle crime. Back in 2011, I said the same thing. State of emergency is not a crime plan. A state of emergency is not something that I see as dealing with crime in a particular way. I think there needs to be better intelligence and a more collaborative approach between all of the different branches of national security. But I am not a national security expert. So this is just my personal opinion and feeling about the state of emergency. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be called. I'm saying that I am not convinced that I am on board with a state of emergency. So a state of emergency was called. Good. And so now we have 15 days, and within that 15-day period of the proclamation, the government has to go to Parliament and they have to debate on whether or not they're going to extend the state of emergency. So according to our constitution, the Prime Minister can call for the state of emergency. The President can proclaim it. For 15 days, we can be under the suspension of rights and increased powers of arrest. And then within that 15-day period, the Parliament must meet, have a debate, and lay out their plans for the rest of the state of emergency. And I believe the longest we can have a state of emergency is 6 months. But don't hold me to that. I could be wrong. So I just want to tack back to the issue of who's present and not present at press conferences. One of the persons that I would have liked to have seen present at the press conference is the Commissioner of Police. And because the state of emergency indicated that the reasons it was being called was to allow the police to deal with a certain level of crime in the country. And I felt that at that press conference, I didn't only want to see elected officials, I also wanted to see our technocrats and bureaucrats. So whether it was the Commissioner of Police alone or the Commissioner of Police and the Chief of Defense Staff, I thought it was strange that we had a state of emergency announcement of that nature and there was nobody from our defense or armed services present at the press conference. We've had press conferences held to talk about how we're going to deal with floods. And we've had people in uniform, right? We've had people from whether it's fire, army, whatever it is, present at the press conference to speak about how we're going to be treating with whatever. So imagine we're calling a state of emergency. The Commissioner of Police is in the country. I'm assuming that the relevant persons from the army are also in the country, and we don't have not one of them present at the press conference either. So I had problems with some of those things. However, right, I had problems with all of those things taking place. However, by about quarter to 10 yesterday morning, I was clear that the press conference was not going to satisfy my concerns and it was not going to meet my standards, right? And so let's get into the real meat of the matter here. And I want you all to pay attention to all of the things that I'm going to say. I also want, because I'm gonna end up having to talk about a government minister, and I won't be naming the government minister's name, but Ollie is stupid. I want the minister to know that I got all of his messages today, right? So all of the messages that you passed on to your colleagues to pass on to me, I got those messages and I received those messages. However, I have concerns and I feel that these concerns need to be shared. So let's start. So I get up at about 7:15 yesterday morning and I am sent a document. The document resembles this, right? The document is the proclamation, but this isn't the form that I got the proclamation in. So CNC3 News would have put up this proclamation because they had this document by about 8 o'clock in the morning. So this is a document that I received and I didn't think the document was real at all. At first, I thought the document had to be fake. So I said to myself, this is weird. So I sent the document to 2 persons. And I sent the document off with the following message. I said to them basically, I said, this document is circulating. I have no idea if this document is real or not. But if it is real, then, well, actually I said, whether or not it is real, you may want to get ahead of the story surrounding this document, because if it is not real, it is likely to be used for mischief, right? Good. So I sent that off immediately. And I want all of you to understand something. At 7:15 on Monday morning, I was aware that this was circulating, and there were most members of the government unaware that this document was circulating. So the document is looked at and eventually I get a response. So let's work through some things. Today I'm drinking ginger beer, spiked ginger beer. It's ginger beer with rum. So this is a press release. So when I asked whether the document was real or not, one of the persons I messaged, a government minister, said, let me go and check. And then they came back and they sent me this press release. So let's say 7:15, I look at the document. By about 7:20, I forward the document. By 8:minutes, I got this document, right? I got the press release from the OPM indicating that the government has called a state of emergency. Then, not too long after, I would have seen this message pop up in my feed, my news feed on social media. And it says, it's from journalist, one of the lead editors at The Guardian, Asha Javid. She says, be careful on social media today, please. Lots of fake information floating around. Use verified sources as much as possible. And when I saw that, I said to myself, okay, so plenty things must be circulating all over social media by now then. So I went on to, somebody messaged me at 8 o'clock and they said, CNC3 has a story saying that there's a state of emergency. By 8 o'clock, and by 8 o'clock, I would have shared the OPM statement. When I shared the OPM statement, not too long after that, I get calls from people who work in fire services. I get calls from people who work in army. I get calls from people who work in Coast Guard. And people who used to work in national security but no longer work in national security. All of them asking me if we are really under a state of emergency. I need you all to understand the seriousness of what I just said. That at 8 o'clock, right, 7:15, I get a copy of the proclamation sent to me. And I don't get it as a screenshot. I get it as a PDF file. So somebody who is a friend of mine sends me a PDF file of the proclamation signed and stamped by the office of the president. I then send it to people within the government, ministers within the government. And when I send it to those ministers within the government, they are not yet aware that there was a signed proclamation for a state of emergency. Then at 8 o'clock, when I would have received the OPM press release, and I would have shared the OPM press release, I then have some members, I'm not saying senior members, but certainly some members in middle management within our armed services calling me to ask me if that is the case. And let me explain why. Because when you are going under a state of emergency, all hands have to be on deck. So these officers are wondering how come they are now hearing that there is a state of emergency, and the way they're hearing about it is through the media. So they haven't heard about it through their chains of command. You understand? So this is at 8 o'clock in the morning. They are wondering how come we have not yet had meetings among ourselves indicating state of emergency. This is how we're supposed to be operating now. This is what is going on. Right? So this is at 8 o'clock. So now I want to show you a conversation that I was having that morning. Right? Bits of it, not the entire thing. So this is 14 minutes past 7 in the morning. The proclamation comes in, right? And it is actually saved proclamation SoE 2024 PDF, 1 page. So this is when I would have strupsed because I wasn't really interested in looking at nothing that hour in the morning. Myself and the person who sent it to me, they sent it to me because they wanted me to verify. They sent it to me because they weren't sure that they believed that the document was true. They sent it to me because they believed that I would be able to say for absolute certainty, yes, this is the case. Yes, this is what is going on. I then reached out to a couple ministers. They weren't sure. They had to go and check. And then they eventually came back to me with information indicating that such is the case. So understand that at 7:15, a civilian, because it was a civilian that sent that to me, at 7:15, a civilian is sending me a PDF version of the proclamation for the state of emergency. At 7:15, I, Rhoda, a civilian, has in her WhatsApp inbox a copy of the PDF of the proclamation of the state of emergency. And when I go and I ask government ministers, they don't know what it is I'm talking about. Right? They are unaware of what it is I'm talking about. So I am having this conversation with a civilian and I'm saying, but this is not making sense. This is not how I am accustomed to Dr. Rowley operating. Something like this would have been, we would have gotten an announcement indicating that there's a press conference that, the office of the Prime Minister is holding a press conference wherever time, whether it's 10 o'clock, whether it's 12 o'clock, whether it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It would not be a situation where there would be a leaked document circulating all over the place like that. So how could this have been leaked? And for good 20 minutes, 30 minutes that morning, or rather I should say, between receiving, let me put the image back up, between receiving this document and between getting confirmation that there was a state of emergency, which would have happened just before 8 o'clock, I was convinced that this was mischief. I was convinced that this was some sort of UNC trick, right? A fake news thing to get people riled up to think that there's a state of emergency, because I am simply not accustomed to seeing the office of the Prime Minister or even the government function in this Vicky-Vi way. Whenever major announcements have to be made, it is always handled in a particular way by the government and certainly by the office of the Prime Minister. I am very accustomed to Minister de Norberger sending out information in a particular way, indicating to people this is happening, this is coming. So by 8 o'clock, I realized that this document was leaked. So when I realized that this document was leaked by 8 o'clock, your girl automatically thought that the leak was in the office of the president, That was me thinking, oh my God, there is a mole in the office of the president. The office of the president have somebody who leaking information and sending information out to people and just, looking to cause chaos. So let me show you the other parts of the conversation. So the civilian is saying to me, this has to be faked. We would have heard of this. The cabinet would have had to meet on this. You would have known by now. This is UNC mischief, right? We are utterly convinced that hour in the morning. So 6:45, right? 7:42, 7:43. We utterly convinced that it had to be mischief. By 7:54, I have gotten the OPM press release. And I share the OPM press release to the civilian right after I post it up on News Source page. So I make sure that I post the OPM press release and the proclamation at the same time, so people see the documents and they know that it is not fake, right? And I send this back to the civilian so that they know, well, it's not fake news, because up until that point in time we were like, this had to be fake news, this is mischief. So once we realize that yes, the proclamation is real and we are under a state of emergency, the conversation shifts now. So I then ask, who leaked the proclamation to you? And he says, he's like, and I'm like, no, I don't need the person's name. I just need to know the profession or link. Because listen, up until this point in time, I expected to hear that is a civil servant inside the office of the president, is somebody who working in the legal section inside the office of the president, right? I was convinced that the office of the president have a mole. And then the person says, a journalist, can't name him or her. So then I'm like, but while that message coming in, I am also writing, right? So I'm like, so the office of the president have a mole. And then I ask, which media house? And then he says, yes, there is a mole. So I'm confused now. Okay, so you get it from a journalist. But if you're saying, yes, there is a mole, then the person that leaked it to the journalist is somebody from the office of the president. So this is 9:15, 9:18. So this is, 2 hours since the document landed in my inbox, right? So we back and forth with this conversation. Yes, it's a mole. Yes, Alana, CNC3 had it first. That was the media house that had it absolutely first. And in a part of the conversation that I did not bother to screenshot for you all to see because it wasn't really that important, I had said to the civilian, CNC3 is the media house that I saw with it first. So the reporter had to come from CNC3. All right, so I was thinking, the mole, leak it from the office of the president, send it to CNC3, and CNC3, the journalists in CNC3, spread it to everybody, right? So now your girl hot. I want to find out who is the mole in the office of the president, because I want to be able to say to people in the office of the president, all you need to clean up all your act. Look, it have people who leaking sensitive information, something as important as a proclamation. It get leaked. Because by 8:30 that morning, I realized that both the office of the president and the office of the prime minister didn't actually want to make the announcement about the state of emergency at 8 o'clock in the morning. They actually, when they realized that the proclamation was circulating and out in the wild all over the place, they hustled to prepare the press release from OPM to indicate to the public, yes, we are under a state of emergency, to ensure that they got in front of the mischief that was already being made, right? Because so all in all, social media does function. All you also know how mainstream media does function. So at minutes to 8, when the OPM press release went out, it was in response to the knowledge that this document was out in the wild. So I there now saying to myself, well, who this journalist get this thing from? At this point in time, I'm no longer interested in who the journalist is, No longer, not even remotely interested in who the journalist is. So I want to pause before I move on, because I want to explain something. There are two persons who are responsible for the creation, or two major offices that are responsible for the creation, the drafting of the proclamation. The Office of the Attorney General has to draft the proclamation, and then they send it over to the Office of the President, and the Office of the President's legal team. They look at the proclamation, ensure that all of the wording is proper and correct and doing what it's supposed to be doing, and then everything is signed off on, right? Signature, stamp, etc. But the drafting of the document happens with the Office of the Attorney General. So, because I had to talk to my people and make sure I message people to find out how this thing does get drafted, how many different offices does have to deal up with this proclamation, because I wanted to be clear. Where was the possibility of this leak? I did not want to jump to conclusions and say, well, all right, it had to be this one. Next thing I find out, oh, no, I have like about three, 4 different hands the document had to pass through. No. Office of the Attorney General, Office of the President. That is where the document does go to. Boom, boom, boom. Right. Good. So then I am asking, what is the name of the media house? Because I want to have a sense of which media house it is. And I want it to be clear that it was CNC3, because I had a hunch that it was Guardian Media Limited that had the document. And I will say the reason I had that hunch is because the last number of occasions that we had a sensitive document from the government being leaked by a member of the cabinet, the leak happened with Guardian Media Limited, right? Guardian Media Limited suddenly have access to a set of documents from sensitive government offices, right? Documents that normally only a handful of people just have access to. Cabinet notes, reports, all of these things ending up in Guardian Media Limited hands and becoming investigative reports and investigative stories. Now, me vexing with nobody, As a reporter, as a journalist, you find your source, you find somebody who giving you information, you go through hard. But when it comes to national security issues, this is where it is get a little sensitive, and I will explain why. The country was not ready with the SoE guidelines yesterday. Usually, if you are having a properly planned and properly executed state of emergency, and I'm saying this because there are some people who are arguing about how it's supposed to be and not supposed to be, so I could only assume that all is national security experts. I am not a national security expert. Instead, I spoke to former national security people to get information about how it is normally go. I spoke to people who are sitting government officials. I spoke to people who are sitting technocrats in our public service to ask them how these things supposed to happen. Clearly, them and I are not experts like you all. And what I was told was, if it is something that can be planned, not like the 1990 coup, right, but something that can be planned, then when you announce the state of emergency to the public, you usually issue the documentation to support it thereafter. So the proclamations and the guidelines. I don't know if you'll remember during COVID, when the Prime Minister would come to talk about the state of emergency linked to COVID and talk about the various amendments, whether it was to the days of restricted movement or the curfews and stuff that had been put in place. Because that's the most recent time we were under a state of emergency, right? During COVID, to ensure that we were safe and that we preserved lives. And when that was taking place, there would be the announcement of a press conference. I want all you to remember this. Everybody who was fighting me down in the chat just now. There would be a press release put out indicating that there was going to be a post-cabinet press or an office of the Prime Minister press conference. And everybody would be wondering, well, oh God, what the Prime Minister wearing? If we know what the Prime Minister wearing, then we know whether or not he going to ease we up and give we fewer days and give we lesser hours or remove the restrictions. Remember that? So how that used to go was, and I want all you to remember, that was a health issue, right? It was a health emergency. And we had the Prime Minister leading all of those press conferences. You have this, a state of emergency dealing with crime. The Prime Minister is the chairman of the National Security Council. And all you're fighting me down to tell me that the Prime Minister shouldn't have been at the press conference? Give me a break. So at those press conferences, you would get the notice going out. We would know what time we're sitting down to take in the press conference. The Prime Minister would lead the press conference, but he would have all of the other subject matter experts present to then address the public and give the public information. That's what I expected to see on Monday. But that didn't happen on Monday. So on Monday, we got the Minister of National Security and the Acting Attorney General. And they came with the proclamation. And then we had to wait until about 9 o'clock Monday night to get the guidelines. I am advised, or I'm informed, that neither the office of the President nor the office of the Prime Minister actually wanted to announce the state of emergency as early as they did yesterday. That what happened at 8 a.m. and then what happened again at 10 a.m. was meant to preempt the leaking of the document. So you have a range of persons who get their hands on a document leaked to them by a journalist. You have me certainly thinking that the journalist had the document leaked to him or her from the office of the President. So let me go on further. So when I kept asking who was the mole, civilian says, I don't know the mole. And then I said, okay. And then the civilian says, but they sent it to a journalist who sent it to me. And I sent it to you to ask if it's true. And I said to the civilian, there are things that the government wanted to put in place before addressing the public. The guidelines, that's what I was referring to. And the civilian says, it's all over the place now. And this is the last screenshot that I'm showing you all. The civilian comes back to me and says, Rhoda, I called my journalist. And the civilian indicates to me in the blotted out area the name of the government minister that sent the proclamation to the journalist. And the civilian says to me, so the leak of the document came from within. It was not supposed to come out just as yet. So, let me say a couple things here. National security is something that we should all take seriously, because national security has a direct impact on individuals. If national security is dealt with seriously here, then national security means that I can be safer in this country. I understand that the People's National Movement is going through a period right now where it's fundamentally in internal elections mode, but not actually in internal elections mode, right? So there's no scheduled elections, but there's a lot of internal fighting taking place. If you have friends in media and you have decided that you're going to be providing friends in media with information, I would like to think that you make wise decisions about what kind of information you're leaking, especially if it is very sensitive information, and how you're going to be leaking that information. Because once information leaves your hand and gets into anybody else's hand, you have no control over what happens with that information. So imagine a situation wherein the government is trying to treat with and deal with crime. You have two offices that are responsible for dealing with the creation of a document. The document gets created and then the document gets leaked. How do we know that the leak of that document didn't also alert criminals and gave them the opportunity to be able to go into hiding, to flee? Because ideally, if you're calling a state of emergency and you're calling the state of emergency as a crime strategy, you would want to be in a position where your police have the advantage, but the criminal entities don't have the advantage. If your information is all over the place, if your information is out and about in anybody's hands, how do you then ensure that the police have the advantage that they need to have over the criminals? How? And again, so let me go down the next part. You are a government minister. You have cabinet documents, cabinet secrets, important documents, and you're just sharing it. How? What would have been the justification behind sending this document to a member of the media? Was he goal? What was the objective? What we was hoping to achieve? Because, and I want all to walk down this road with me. Imagine for an instant that you are a prime minister and you went over to Tobago to host an event and also, I guess, to deal up with the passing of your brother, right? Because I'm aware that there were multiple things the prime minister was attending on the weekend. There was a party at his residence, and there was also the passing of his brother. So you are in Tobago, where you're from, where you just live, and over the course of that weekend, there is information coming in from, intelligence information. So you are back and forth with members of your cabinet. Nobody's saying you have to be on the larger island, right? Pardon. I certainly don't believe that governance could only happen from the island of Trinidad. Governance could also happen in the island of Tobago. So this thing is back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You all eventually decide this is what we're going to do to be able to treat with the possibility of a mass reprisal situation. because that's what I'm told is the concern of the government, that there's likely to be mass reprisals, like gunmen go out into a public space, like a grocery or a mall or something, and just spray down people with bullets, which would be absolutely horrid. That would be the end of everything that we hold dear, near and dear in this country, if something like that was to happen here. So you have a situation where you've made a decision in the wee hours of the morning, and the likelihood is that the announcement was going to be made at the same time that the guidelines will have been ready and prepared. So pause for a minute and think to yourself that the Prime Minister may have well been prepared to be back in Trinidad Monday afternoon to make the announcement of the state of emergency along with the guidelines. But a document gets leaked first thing in the morning, gets into everybody's hands, and so it precipitates a lot of action that nobody figured they would have to take, which confuses me, because if you leak the document, you have to know that there will be consequences to a leak, right? So imagine my amusement when I am seeing people talking about let's only get information from valid sources. I see that and I say to myself, Rhoda, you might dead with laugh here today, you know. You might kill Kitty with laugh here today, you know. I mean, we serious? Are we serious? We letting personal ambitions get in the way of national security now? We letting personal ties get in the way of governance? That's where we reach as a country, as a government, as a nation. That's where we reach. Well, ease me to fuck up, eh? Ease me. I am fed up of the impact that this internal fight and struggle in the PNM is having on the rest of the country. I real fed up of that. Monday didn't need to happen the way Monday happened. You all have yourselves a very good evening. Enjoy the rest of 2024. And I will talk to you in 2025. Wishing you only the best, only the best, only the best. Thanks for joining me.